So here we go again. This talk is Einstein Relativity, Revival After 30 Years by the Wheeler School of Relativity. It often surprises people that there was a long gap between Einstein presenting his relativity theories and then being taken up properly by academia as an education to physics students. So here's the main person. It's John Wheeler. He was an American theoretical physicist, and he was largely responsible for reviving interest in general relativity in the United States after World War II. So I'm going by this article called John Wheeler, Relativity and Quantum Information. So the article says, with only one quantitative observational contact, that was the peripheral shift of Mercury, and the two qualitative ones, the expanse of the universe and gravitational light deflection, general relativity in the early 1950s had become a backwater of physics, i.e. it was mostly ignored. It was more a branch of mathematics than of physics, and a not very interesting one. Among the world's leading physicists at the time, only Wheeler envisioned a future in which curved space-time would be fundamental to the nature of matter and the astrophysical universe, because, in his words, relativity is too important to leave to the mathematicians. Wheeler set out to discover its roles. Through that quest, over the subsequent 2 decades, he and his students and their intellectual descendants would revitalise general relativity and make it an exciting field for other researchers. So it goes on to say, the first step in his quest, he taught a course in relativity at Princeton University, the first such course since 1941. In his 1952 to 1953 course, he began to develop his own physical and geometrical viewpoint on the subject. So, saying again what's just been mentioned, Wheeler did the first course in relativity since 1941, and that was the first course after World War II. It is called the Renaissance of General Relativity, and that means rebirth. So going by this article cited, the complex development of general relativity presents intriguing challenges for historians of science. After an initial burst of excitement about its extraordinary implications, the theory underwent a 30-year period of stagnation, during which only a few specialists, mostly mathematicians, worked on it, i.e. after Einstein became famous in 1919, it was only really worked upon by mathematicians for about 30 years, and the physicists were ignoring it. In the aftermath of World War II, however, general relativity gradually re-entered the mainstream of physics, attracting an increasing number of practitioners and becoming the basis for the current standard theory of gravitation and cosmology, a process that Clifford Will coined the term Renaissance of General Relativity. So from this article, dealing with Einstein's theory of general relativity was largely ignored for 3 decades. It tries to explain it in the following way. In the years following Einstein's publication of his theory, that would be from 1919 for general relativity, his ideas were celebrated by the public as the battles came to an end in World War I, that is. Leopold Infeld, who wrote The Evolution of Physics with Einstein, believed that Einstein's theory gave survivors a form of intellectual escapism after the war, that war being World War I. He concluded that people were weary of hatred, of killing. Ronald Clark quoted Infeld as saying, "Here was something which captured the imagination, the mystery of the sun's eclipse and of the penetrating power of the human mind." But the theory's popularity, at least in the scientific community, quickly burned out. Researchers detailed how scientists largely ignored general relativity between the mid-1920s and the mid-1950s. In a recent paper published in the European Physical Journal H, the researchers suggest that this was likely because scientists viewed the theory as a lot of extraordinarily complicated mathematics that produced results very similar to those of Isaac Newton's equations. And Isaac Newton's equations were, of course, much simpler. In other words, scientists thought the theory was correct, but just not that important, dismissing its broader implications. So for about 30 years, scientists actively discouraged research of Einstein's ideas, which were viewed merely as providing small corrections to Newtonian gravity. And that was until the renaissance of general relativity, as physicist C.M. Wheel dubbed it. So what we have as Einstein's relativity comes via John Wheeler's School of Relativity. And from an article here entitled John Archibald Wheeler and the Recertification of General Relativity as True Physics. So, as per Wikipedia, Charles Meissner is an American physicist and one of the authors of Gravitation. That is a book they wrote on general relativity. Recertification means the process of recertifying. Recertify means to renew the certification of, especially certification given by a licensing board. Certify means to confirm formally as true, accurate, or genuine. Now, however, there are errors in the Wheeler School of Relativity, according to this person called Chung-Ying Lau, at that article there, and he points out the Wheeler School of Relativity got things wrong. According to Lau, he says, general relativity is difficult to understand, and certainly it is discovered as not yet self-consistent. Einstein's theory of measurement is known as incompatible with the rest of physics, and thus misinterpretations were created, and the other parts of physics were mainly quantum physics. Among them, the dominant misinterpretations of the Wheeler School are due to being inadequate in mathematics and physics. In particular, their distortions of Einstein's equivalence principle maintain initial errors and create their own errors. Moreover, the errors on dynamic solutions have far-reaching consequences to other areas of physics. These errors are responsible for the mistakes in the press release of the 1993 Nobel Committee, who was unaware of the non-existence of dynamic solutions and the experimental supports to Einstein's equivalence principle. So this is a video I put on the internet by Dr. Lowe with his dealing with a paper by these people who worked with him. And that's it, finished, thank you. So basically pointing out that a lot of mistakes to Einstein's relativity came after Einstein, because there was a 30-year gap between academia, or i.e. physicists, properly taking up looking at Einstein's relativity. Thank you.